Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for being here. I think that maybe some more people will trickle in as they get their lunches, and we'll be joined by some more, which we hope. In the meantime, thank you all very much for being here. You know, ECS really is a special thing, and we're able to make a lot of wonderful connections with international ministers, not just around the world, but also here in our backyard. And one of these is our speaker today, and it is my pleasure to introduce him to you. This is Father Colman Okechukwu Nwokoro. He is a priest of the Diocese of Okigwa in Nigeria. Following his ordination in 2011, he served his diocese in educational positions and most recently as principal of a regional high school. He is currently pursuing a doctorate in systematic ethics at Marquette University here in Milwaukee. His research interests include the peace process, interreligious dialogue, human rights, African theology and culture, migrant and refugee studies, and political theology. He's a very well-rounded gentleman. He is also a certified human rights consultant and educator. So please help me in welcoming Father Colman.
Thank you, Bess. Thank you, Ryan, for organizing this, for welcoming me here in this wonderful institution. I think pleasure is mine in a more significant way. Yeah, for coming here to do this. Yeah, I think the topic, or if you look at the handout I just presented before you, yeah, what I just want to share is it all about my what I'm planning to do or what I've started doing, you know, regarding my dissertation. So the inclusive peace process at the backdrop of theological anthropology and the Catholic social teaching, the key to preventing and ending violent conflict. Let me just give us a little background that led me into this. When I was in Nigeria as a high school teacher and a principal, I was planning to do my graduate studies. I didn't have any place in mind, but one of the primary things I had in mind was if I had the opportunity to do my graduate studies, I'm going to work either in environmental ethics or peace process. So when I finally got the acceptance from Notre Dame University to do my program, I was offered to do moral theology. And when I look at moral theology, I said, okay, this is an avenue for me to get into this research. But when I got there, actually, it was like it was not going to be easy for me to do that because Notre Dame, as you know, has this Institute of Peace. And I was not there. So what I did was to engage myself in political theology and the theology of peace building, being taught by Professor McLean and Professor Katangole from Uganda. And actually, these two classes really offered me a very wonderful background to do what I'm doing now. And when I got to Marquette for my PhD, I did a lot of courses. Then when I did a course in just war ethics, it offered me another good ground for doing what I'm doing now. You know, when we talk about peace, it's kind of validating the reality of war. That's one thing you have to bear in mind. Because if we have not had war in our world, we wouldn't be talking about peace. And when we talk about peace, it means we all are working towards making our society a peaceful one and a just one. This time around, we are not talking about peace only, but an aspect of peace. And what's that? Inclusive peace process. And when we talk about inclusive peace process, what it means is a kind of trying to indict, or maybe trying to say that all the processes before now have not given us what we want in the world by way of offering us the peace we are seeking for or we are looking for. Now, by way of history, the history of the world is almost the history of the world. So you cannot, any person can argue against the birthday. It's obvious. Right from the word go, even from the scriptures, we've had wars, people fighting one another. Now, in our own time, we have had these wars, and still today we still have wars. Then one will ask, is it possible to live in the world without war? That would be a question. Is it possible? Fine, good. It could be possible too. Because if you get to ask yourself, what's God's plan for humanity? God's plan for humanity is that we should live in peace with one another. Then at this point, if we begin to see war in our world today, it means humanity has not even imbibed by God's direction or God's instruction. Now, this is what we have been seeing in our world, and right from pre-Socratics, and during the time of classical philosophers, Socrates, Aristotle, and the rest of them, they started talking about war, and they started talking about how we can live in peace. Until we got to the time of Augustine, who was really inspired and influenced to talk about war by Cicero and Ambrose of Milan, Archbishop of Milan. So these people really influenced him, and Augustine kind of changed the narrative, so to speak, in a way that people begin to talk about war and people that could be involved in war. And that's why today, people, when you talk about just war ethics, you cannot speak about that or talk about that without bringing Augustine into the conversation. And as a matter of fact, Augustine today is seen as the father of just war theory. Even though people would just say that he talks about it from the pastoral point of view, that he never systematized this theory. And it was that way till fast forward to 12th, 13th century, the time of Thomas Aquinas, who systematized it. Then, one of the things Augustine tells us while we're just talking about is, he believes that we can use war to engender justice and peace. And at the same time, Augustine as well believes that war is evil. And on that ground that he begins to see war as love. So when you just fight war, you are loving the other neighbor, at the same time make peace in the world. Now, somebody will ask, if you really want to criticize Augustine, you can just say, how can something you say to be evil bring something good? It might fall into what we call principle of contradiction or non-contradiction. You know, something cannot be at the same time be. So but then, that's not why we are here. Then, fast forward to Aquinas, who systematized this by telling us at the same time that war is evil. That's how he begins about this conversation in Summa Theologia. Now, when you see that, he said that we can only see war as something just on 3 conditions. And what are the conditions? It must be declared by a legitimate authority. Second, it must be just. Third, it must have right intention. So, on the long run, he says that war also could be seen as charity. But then, we begin to talk about just war now as a way we can bring about peace, justice. But then the question now is, what brings about war? at first instance. What brings about war at first instance is injustice. Injustice. Suppression of people's rights. Because when you try to mete out justice on people, it's expected that people might react at a certain point. And when they react, the other one might also try to do a kind of pushback. And what happens? You begin to see war. Now, this issue of just war now becomes a way we can use war, bring ethics or morality into conduct of war. And that's why it's called just war theory, which means there must be a companion of morality and ethics. That's what it means. When we are going to war with any person, or when we have wars going on between two nations, they must meet these three conditions. Now, if I should raise this question, because as peace students or peace researchers, as one of the peace researchers, the question will always be, what is read or yardstick for measuring right intention? I mean the question. Because when I say that I have the right intention to go to war, and you claim to have right intention to go to war, then what do we use to measure the right intention? Now, in this case, we have two persons who have really talked about in this contemporary time. First, we talked Lisa Cahill, and also Capis, Joseph Capis. I think they say that you can only know about, or you can only assess right intention by the outcome of war, the action. And as a matter of fact, action speaks better than whatever we talk about. When I say that I love you, I think you see it, you measure it by my action and attitude towards you. So that's the way it has been. So remember, we're still talking about just war as a background. Now, we see this just war as only thing then that can give us peace and justice in the world. But then you ask yourself, has just war really done that? Do we have peace in the world as of today? Do we have justice as of today? Then you begin to ask, the question now will be, is it from the just war, or those who apply just war? Do we even respect these conditions? Now, when St. Thomas Aquinas highlight these conditions, which I've mentioned already, we have the jurist who brought in the legal conversation with this just war. I talk about somebody like Francisco de Vitoria and Francisco Suarez. They are from Spain, who talked about this. And they tried to do this with other jurists. They brought into this conversation what we call two things that provided backdrop for developing international law of war. And what are that? Jus ad bellum and jus in bellum. And what is jus ad bellum? Jus ad bellum is justice for going to war. And jus in bellum is justice in the conduct of war. So the three conditions we mentioned, established by Thomas Aquinas, belong to jus ad bellum. The jus in bellum, we have two conditions: proportionality and discrimination. So this is exactly what we're talking about. Then you look at all these things, and we still have wars in our world today. And it's quite clear that in many places that we have had war, very often you have seen non-combatants being killed. Very often you have seen some institutions being destroyed. Very often you have seen establishment being destroyed and all the rest of them. Then begin to ask, who's supposed to respect these laws we made just to bring peace in our world? Now, it's on this case, like what I'm going to do in my dissertation in chapter 1, is a kind of just war and the crisis and the conflicts even now. Which means, for me, my take is just war has failed. That's for me. Because we're not, when you just get something to solve problem and you still have that problem, will you credit that thing as something that has really succeeded? No. It has not succeeded. And it's on this ground that even everyone in the world, the conciliators, the peace researchers, even United Nations Organization, World Bank, they have come to understand that, yes, even the just war, and as a matter of fact, let me just because the just war theory, its application, in essence, started with both just World War I and World War II. Then you ask yourself at the end of the day, did we really get what we wanted? And it was because just war could not even give us the solution we want in our world. What happened? Right after just World War II, what happened? The League of Nations. There was a formation of League of Nations, which later metamorphosed into United Nations Organization and later United Nations. And why did they form these? They want in a situation whereby they can bring all the nations together so that we agree how we can bring peace in our world. And when we had the United Nations established in 1948, 10th November, what happened? Between 1948 and 1988, we had what we call then, instead of now talking about, they started talking about using what they call peacekeeping missions. And what's the essence of peacekeeping missions? To bring about ceasefires in places we have wars. Now, and as a matter of fact, between 1948 and 1988, United Nations recorded 13 peacekeeping missions. And that one is called first generation peacekeeping mission. And between 1990 and 1995, we had the second generation peacekeeping missions. So when you just look at that, I just highlighted some places they had this. Now, that's ourselves. Did peacekeeping mission solve the problem? That would be the question. No, we never had this solution. We never had the peace as we desire. We never had justice as we desire. Then, the researchers continue to go on to find out, to begin to research, to question, to raise issues. What shall we do now? Now peace, just war cannot help us. Now we have brought in peacekeeping mission and it cannot help us. What happens? What next shall we do? Then we started talking about peacemaking. You know, then begin to see the experts now going into places to teach people. They started a kind of evolving principles that will help people to live in peace. Now, and this peacemaking at the same time moved into peace building. And what happens? Have we really realized our dreams? That will be the question. Now, we continue to move on, Trojan, to see that if we can achieve our desire, and at the end of the day, what happens? Just fast forward to just a couple of years ago, it's not up to 10 years. United Nations, World Bank and other organizations say that it's a pity that we have been working tirelessly morning, afternoon, and night, but we have not really achieved our aim. Then how do we get to nip these problems in the bud? And we started talking about inclusive peace process. And what is inclusive peace process? That's exactly what we are going to talk about. And what is inclusive peace process? By way of inclusivity or inclusion, which means it's a process that involves everyone. So we see that this only way we can achieve, because all this, what it means that when we begin to talk about peace, you bring experts, conciliators to go to places and begin to tell them about peace. And at the end of the day, especially in the Christ-ridden areas, and we have come to understand that you cannot just go to a place where they have crisis and violence and problems, and you exclude them in the discussions. That wouldn't help. Maybe leaving them at the point of implementation, because that's what we have been hearing. No, we have made peace for these people. We have asked them to live this way. We have asked them to do this and do that. But at the end of the day, you just leave them. And at worst, you can now bring in the armies from different countries to be there. The same way we have had it in different places, Iraq and all the rest of them. You know, you just keep the armies. And you keeping the army in a place, and you stay, the place is so quiet, it's not peace. That is not peace. That could be a kind of what we call forced peace. And you remember what happened, I think about 2 years ago, when Biden came in, he withdrew the US Army from Iraq. What happened? I mean, they started. Having been there for 20 years, and one would expect that this army has been there for 20 years. At least while they are living, it's expected that there will be peace in that place. Why did they leave and the people got back to war? And that will just tell you that something significant was not done. Because if I have a problem with you cannot bring Katie to come and solve our problems. And can't you just solve our problems without bringing us on the table of negotiation? That would be, I don't even know. You can only just, at the end of the day, just present us with memos and whatever. Look at what you're going to do. We have talked about peace and want you people to live in peace. Now you have to do this. Now you ask yourself, when we are talking about inclusive peace process, what's the essence? What do we really want to achieve? We want a situation whereby people's voices should be heard. And by hearing people's voices, you'll be able to undercover, unearth the root causes of these problems and the challenges. Because all this while, you just go there and begin to talk about peace, 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 justice, 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 without knowing the cause of this war, without knowing the cause of this violence, without knowing the cause of this conflict. And that's a problem. Because you cannot exclude any person, and that person will be happy with you. You cannot exclude any person in something that concerns him. And as a matter of fact, among other things, peace is seen as a common good. And if peace is seen as a common good, it must be coming to everyone. So that's why we begin to talk about inclusive peace process. And the inclusive peace process, among other things, will just give us the idea of this, or what it should help us to achieve. And what are those things? Address root causes. Empowers marginalized groups. Builds trust. Encourage participation. Reduce inequality. Supports sustainability. Enhances legitimacy. This last one is very, very important. Like I said, you cannot discuss issues that concern me without bringing me into that. If you want that thing to have legitimate status, every person concerned must be brought together to talk about it. So inclusive peace process, among other things, ensures legitimacy in this process. Now, I've talked about this. Then the question now will be, who are these people that should be brought into this? Who are these people that have been excluded in the course of peace process? First, women have been excluded. The young people have been excluded. The indigenous people have been excluded. And these categories, if you don't bring them to peace process, you are not doing the right thing. And as a matter of fact, you know that the people between 18 and 25 years very often are the people who can always cause problems in our world. And you cannot be talking about peace in the world, you exclude this group of people. What are you talking about? How do you want to get peace? I remember one of my papers, I'm talking about one of my papers on the interreligious dialogue. I'm just trying to talk about insufficient knowledge as a bottleneck, as an obstacle towards a fruitful dialogue. One of the things I kind of suggested in that paper is the time has come when we can now begin to teach about the tenets of this religion to people on the margins of society, our young ones, because they need to get to know all this is, because if they don't know about the tenets of their religions, any person can ask them to go on the street and begin to fight, and begin to cause problems, and begin to do whatever is trying. So the same thing, so these are the people that are excluded. Then the indigenous people, like I said before now, you cannot come here, the working people are fighting with maybe people from other, maybe races and all the rest of them, and you want to discuss, you only just tell them, like I said before now, it's okay, we don't need you here, just what we want you to do, just do this, and there will be peace. It cannot work, because you haven't addressed the problem. Because the people might be telling you that, yes, these people we have been marginalized. We have been marginalized. People have been fighting. These are the things we have been denied access to political power. And that's why we are fighting. So if you must calm them down, you have to create an opportunity for them to be part of political power. Because you have discovered their problems. If they are agitating that, they don't have basic amenities in their community, and that's why they are fighting. So when you are negotiating, because you brought them at the negotiating table, what happens? They will tell you, this is my problem. And it's okay. We're going to provide these basic amenities. And if you discover that when those things happen or are in place, they will stop fighting. But if you don't bring them at the negotiation, how would you know their problem? How would you know why they are agitated? How would you know why they are fighting? So that's why bringing indigenous people at the negotiation table, when you talk about inclusive, very, very necessary. It is very, very, very necessary. Now, you talk about women. We are somehow living in a patriarchal society. Even though the Westerners will tell you that, oh, it is not existing, but it is not true. You ask yourself, when last did you have a woman president in the United States of America? When last have you had at all? So that's kind of there. But you might claim that, oh, we are no more. We talk about patriarchal society only in Africa and Asia. But you can just see that almost everywhere we have kind of sense of patriarchy. Even in peace process we've been talking about, when you go to the United Nations, look for peace experts. How many of them are women? I mean, the question. An interreligious dialogue. Check the number of men there and check the number of women there. I mean, the question. And you know that women with the kind of character they have, if you really need to bring them into peace process, things might change for good or for better. So you cannot just kind of exclude this kind of group of people. You talk about peace process. Then the society at large. I'm talking about the society at large. Who are the people? We have some organizations, NGOs. We have civil society organizations, civil liberty organizations. These people will bring them into conversation table. And what I'm trying to say, you want varied thoughts, varied ideas. We talk about inclusive peace process. Because I believe that you have something in you, and I believe that this person has something in him. Therefore, come in, let us see what you have. Maybe your idea might help the world. Maybe your thought might help the world to live in peace. So unfortunately, we have not gotten to know this. Now, one will now ask, do you mean to bring every person we talk about, since you are talking about it, maybe bring everyone, people say both Tom, Dick, and Harry. Do you want to bring every person? No, we are talking about constructive representation. Is it caveat? Constructive representation. You don't just bring every person. You have to understand, first, those who don't have personal interests. Those who are not just going there to be bought. Because in our world, a lot of us have, when you see a lot of people fighting for something, you can just see that they are fighting for that thing because of their personal aggrandizement. Because of their personal interest. And this is what we are going to see when we talk about inclusive peace process. Because at the end of the day, who controls the whole thing? Government, political elites. And if political elites are now going to control the process, what do you think? Those who are loyal to them will be the people now that will be brought to the negotiating table. And if those who are loyal to them are brought to the negotiating table, what do you think? What do you expect? They will play their bidding. Now, that's why we suspect this. And that's why what I'm just talking about now, see, at the backdrop of theological anthropology and the Catholic social teaching, which means bringing theological anthropology and the Catholic social teaching into the conversation as a way of making it worthwhile and as a way of making it so be what we think that it should be. And what is theological anthropology? Theological anthropology means simple that we are all created by one God. And if God has created all of us, we are created equal. Remember, we say that one of the things inclusive peace process does is to kind of erase inequality from our society. Which means if all of us are created equal, what it means, everyone, gender, group, must be represented when we are talking about inclusive peace process. Because by theological anthropology, all of us are created as humans. And if all of us are created as humans, there's one thing that defines all of us, and what is that? Human dignity. And if all of us have human dignity, which means we cannot say that this one is greater than the other one. It will not be the case as we see it in George Orwell's work, Animal Farm. All animals are equal, but some are more equal than others. I know some of you must have read that work by George Orwell, Animal Farm. So it shouldn't be the case. And human dignity is not something that is acquired by the level of your education. It's not something that you bought because you have money. Every person, whether poor or rich, has human dignity. And as a matter of fact, if you have human dignity, it means you are endowed with rich potential. Everyone is endowed with rich potential. So if everyone is endowed with rich potential, it means everyone is expected to be at the negotiating table when we are talking about inclusive peace process. So that's why I brought in theological anthropology. So that when we are talking about it, because what I'm working on is basically from the politics of the day. But I want to bring it into conversation with theology. Now, and we understand that it is theological anthropology is the backdrop of Catholic social teaching. I'm talking about Catholic social teaching. There are principles in Catholic social teaching developed from biblical supposition about grace of them. And what are those things? Since all of us have human dignity, it means everyone, when we talk about the inclusive peace process, everyone is expected to participate. And this is one of the principles of Catholic social teaching. And Catholic social teaches about the human rights too, that every person has, since every person has human dignity, therefore every person has that right to be with every other person, to talk about things that concerns them. Now, you talk about solidarity, it's another principle. And solidarity means what? We have to be together. We have to be together to work for things that will help us to build our society better, or make our society better. Solidarity. Then we talk about the principle of subsidiarity. Principle of subsidiarity that has to do, since we involve the local people, which means the principle of subsidiarity must be there, because the principle of subsidiarity has to do that, beginning from the scratch to work on something that will finally get into global stage. So which means you have to start, because when you talk about principle of solidarity, which means you're now bringing the local people into it. So that's exactly what you're talking about. So this becomes how we think, we believe that inclusive peace process can better taking care of this violence, problems, injustice in our world. So what I mean is that theological anthropology and social teaching must be a companion to inclusive peace process if we really want to get our world to be a peaceful world. So my dear brothers and sisters, and this actually, summarily, there are a lot of things that we can talk about in inclusive peace process. But for now, let us stop at this point and allow you maybe to bring in your own perspective, in this conversation. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you, Brother Colman. I think that because many people have 1 o'clock classes, yes, some people may be sliding out. But for those who do not have to rush off, we probably have time for just 1 or 2 questions, if there's anyone who has something to ask. Oh, you're going to have to fight for it.
Oh, okay.
No, it was,
It would arm wrestle, thank you. So a question, and you probably just didn't have time to go into this. What, if you're talking even on the most local level, bringing people in, what happens if different groups do not agree on your basic principles, for example? So say, for instance, they don't agree on the fact that everybody's got human dignity, or that, we don't need to work at the local level, or something like that. That if, like some of these basic principles that you have, like from Catholic social teaching, how do you work in a situation like that? Where say most people would say, well, yeah, you're human beings, so of course, yeah, we can talk with you. But what if some people say, well, no, some are more equal than others? How would that work then?
Okay, I think the only thing I'll just say, it's gonna make the work more complex. Mm. So what do you mean? You begin with what we call orientation. Mm-hmm. That's the only way. Okay. Then you have to let them understand that, no, you didn't get it right. We are not just, like I said, every person has this. It might be start by asking them questions. Mm-hmm. Do you believe that we are created by one God? And if they still believe that God created us, I think it makes the work easier. Mm-hmm. Then it becomes problematic when somebody will now say, oh, I don't believe that I'm created by God. Therefore, I don't believe in human dignity. That's where the work becomes more complex. Yeah. So, but in this case, let us just assume that we are now talking to people who believe, whether they are going to church or not, people who believe that we are created by God, or we are created even though not even by God. Mm-hmm. Therefore, if we are created, the next question would be, do you think that I'm created better than the other person? If they agree that, oh, I'm not created better than the other person, even though I'm richer, or even though that I'm more intelligent, or even though that I'm smarter, no. Which means, so the best thing, like I will just tell you that it makes the work more complex when you have these disagreements. So what it means, you start with orientation. Okay. to tell them actually you are this, and the other person is what you are.
Okay. Thanks. I was just curious.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, mine is actually a follow-up on Kathy's more specific instances of situations that really would challenge this. And I was thinking specifically of two situations. One of them is Al-Qaeda and ISIS, who won't talk to you. They just won't talk. In other words, they're out to achieve their goal, whatever it is. We can, talk about the prudence of the United States response to Al-Qaeda and all that kind of stuff, but I'm not going to get into that. But the question is, when you have somebody like Al-Qaeda or ISIS, even more so, who simply will not negotiate, they won't talk because they know they're right and they're going to achieve their goal by violent means because that's what they feel that they're called to do. So that's one situation. The other situation is, and I'm not going to, everyone has their own opinion on this, and I'm not going to, but I'm going to say, the way it seems to me anyway, is when you have Russia and Ukraine, you have Russia who has this idea of greater Russia that should include Ukraine. And they feel like that it's a divine call to create the greater Russia by absorbing the Ukraine. Or at least that's what Kirill, the patriarch is saying. I don't know what Putin says. So, but so you have these situations. I mean, these are people who, have Genesis. They have, everyone's made in the image and likeness of God, but they still think that they're being called by God to create the greater Russia at the expense of the sovereignty of Ukraine. Okay, so they think that that's a divine call, and they therefore think it's consistent with the gospel because they're Christians, right? Or, Kirill claims to be a Christian. So you see what I'm saying? How do you, in those kind of situations, implement something like this? When the concerns aren't necessarily, now there may be some secondary cause of economic situations that exacerbate or maybe push people into ISIS because they're having economic difficulty or whatever. But my point is what's the root cause? I don't know the root cause. Root cause is an ideology, and how do you, and they're not listening. There's no conversation. So my question is, how do you apply something like this to a situation where you have that kind of ideology that seems to be impervious to them considering they think that they're right because they think they're on God's side,
Yeah, good question. Yeah, I think what I was just talking about, I just talked about the issue of United Nations and how they brought all the member nations to agree on something, on how we are going to make the world, how to make the world peaceful and just. Now in this case, and this is where we begin to talk about the international law of war. Now, what is the international law of war? We have to apply this, what we call about the, we started talking about when we talked about the issue of law coming into conversation of war. And what's that? We talked about use ad bellum and use in bellum. Now, in this case, then the question would now be, is United Nations there as a wonderful organization that can, because United Nations is a kind of, we have, all these nations have given United Nations their will to come into solving these problems of war. And that's why I'm not somehow happy with United Nations, because for me, just like I'm seeing United Nations at this time as having gotten to the status of toothless bulldog. They only talk about issues without even doing something about it. So in this case, the Bible should not be the question now that God has just made us to be. Like I said, remember, I mentioned that what's the plan of God for humanity? That we should live in peace. And if we actually people of peace, what happens? What it means that even if when you don't lack something eating, what do? I should help you. I should help to provide something for you to eat. And that's how you can have peace. So it's not a situation that, oh, you have all this, and your brother doesn't have, and you still want to keep him at that kind of condition, and what do you expect? He might turn to be a criminal against you, and that's the problem. And this is where United Nations should be strong enough to clamp down on any person who is not respecting that agreement. But what we see today is like United Nations somehow selective. When they see that maybe this one is a very strong nation, you see them act somehow funny way. But when they see that this one is just a kind of, you see them acting the somehow funny way. So what you ask in this case should be the work of all of us. And that's why United Nations, the inclusive peace we are talking about has not even started. They are only making it as a suggestion. They have not even started applying it. And that's why we are talking about it. So if actually we are true to ourselves and we begin to work on this inclusive peace process and start applying it, most of these problems will be taken care of. But the problem is this: are we really going to respect it? So the problem lies that we need to come together and say that there is a problem. And when we say that there is a problem, we ask ourselves, how do we solve our problem?
Father Colman, I'm afraid we have to leave it there because we have to give up the room. Thank you so much. We appreciate you coming to talk to us very much. Thank you all for coming.